months, a task force has been looking into the juvenile justice system in the state of Indiana and how it serves our children and teenagers who've gotten into some trouble with the law. And the findings indicate that there are some serious problems. Now, that task force is co-chaired by our local state representative, Wendy McNamara, and she joins us now with the key findings of their research. Thank you so much for spending the time with us today. And we've been following along as your task force has been looking into this huge, important issue, and now you have some results of your work. We have those, the key findings listed on our website in full, but because of our time constraint, I want to talk about a few points here. First off, your findings indicate that detention is not necessarily being used for the most serious violent offenses, and that some of the kids are being placed there for much lower level offenses. Talk about why that is so important and what we're talking about here.
Some of the findings indicate that nearly 80% of juveniles are finding their way into the justice system or finding it through a status offense, something like truancy, or a misdemeanor offense. Nearly 32% of those are spending at least one day in detention. One day is not going to be very effective. So the question is, why do we have such a disproportionate number of youth finding their way into the juvenile system, specifically into detention for status or misdemeanor offenses? And hopefully we can have answers to that as we continue with the task force and the things that they continue to find for us.
Just so I'm clear on what you're talking about here, you're talking about the fact that detention is not necessarily, or maybe a little bit too serious for those types of offenses, or are you talking about that the stay needs to be a little bit longer to be able to correct the problem?
It would be that most juveniles are finding themselves into detention when they probably don't need it.
Right.
Detention is being used as a deterrent rather than a punishment, and it's having really the opposite effect. Sometimes when you talk about having people exposed to jail, it makes them a better criminal. We don't want any student or individual to experience that as a juvenile. That doesn't necessarily need to go into detention. So probably one of the key findings that's interesting is that there's nearly 1,200 youth that were assigned to detention in 2019 that were under the age of 13 years old. So that means that somebody who is under 13 years old, nearly 1,200 of them spent at least a day, 2 or 3 in detention in 2019.
And that can really affect, I mean, they can affect anybody, but especially a child that's still in their formative years like that. What kind of alternatives are you looking at that would be better for these low-level or status offenses, or are we even gotten to that point yet where we're looking at that?
That will probably be one of the major conversations of the task force. It will probably be one of the major things that we tackle going forward is how do we do status offenses in the state of Indiana? How do we deal with a truancy that's over and over in school rather than finding detention for that individual? Ideally, it would be a wraparound services in the community. Those have bigger lifts to them, meaning as a state and frankly as a nation, we lack people with social work degrees, psychology degrees, to provide these wraparound services. So we have to be creative in trying to find those types of services for individuals. That's always going to be a challenge, I think, but I want to approach it in a way that we do with teacher shortages by offering scholarships for people to create a pipeline for social work or for psychology to provide those wraparound services that would better be suited for a juvenile versus sending them to a detention center.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, we don't have a whole lot of time, and this is a huge topic that you know we could talk about for a long time. But I want to get to one more finding before we leave here, and that is that Black youth are disproportionately likely to be in detention than whites, and we're talking about a considerable increase. Talk about that. How bad is it, and do we know why?
Black youth are going to be about 2.5 times more likely to be detained, and then about 22% of them will wind up in the juvenile population. Again, we're looking into it. I don't know that it's any more surprising comparatively to the rest of the nation. But again, if you look at something and you compare it to their white peers, they're winding up in juvenile detention at the rate of 2 to 1.
Wow.
So definitely something that we're going to look into and try to come up with alternatives for.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to make sure I mention is, while these rates sound exorbitant, juvenile crime has decreased significantly from 2016 to today. It has steadily decreased nationally as well as Indiana, so that's a good sign. So it allows us to focus specifically on some of those key findings that stick out so that we can better help youth in the state of Indiana.
Okay, what are the next steps here?
Next steps, I'm going to convene the task force on November 29th. We will look over the recommendations from all 3 task force subcommittees and try to take a vote on those recommendations. I'll meet with Senator Kreider, who is my co-chair, and we'll come up with some legislation for next session and probably the session after that that will help address some of these key findings and things that stick out that need to be fixed, if you want to use that term, in the state of Indiana.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, State's Representative Wendy McNamara, for this important work that you're doing here, and we will continue to follow along as you do that. In the meantime, we do have those 5 key findings from your research that you've done here on our website, tristatehomepage.com. Thank you, State Representative McNamara.
Thank you very much.